In a small, weather-beaten town nestled between jagged mountains and a treacherous sea, there lived a fisherman named Elias. His life was simple, his days a repetitive cycle of early mornings and long nights out on the water, casting his nets and hauling in the sea's reluctant offerings. But for all the simplicity of his existence, Elias carried a heavy burden, a grief that clung to him like the fog that never seemed to lift from the town's shores. Elias had once been a father, but that was before the sea had claimed his only son, Jonah. In a storm so fierce that it left the town reeling for months. Jonah had been just 16, a boy with a quick smile and dreams as vast as the ocean. He had begged his father to let him join the other men on their fishing boats, insisting he was ready. Against his better judgment, Elias had relented. The storm struck that very night, a tempest that turned the sea into a monster of black waves and howling winds. Jonah's boat was found days later, shattered on the rocks, but his body was never recovered. The loss hollowed out Elias, leaving him a shell of the man he once was. He returned to the sea each day, as if in penance, searching the waves for some sign of his boy. The other fishermen spoke of him in hushed tones, saying he was cursed, that the sea would never release its hold on his soul. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elias was out on the water alone, as he often was now. The sea was unusually calm, the surface as smooth as glass. It was the kind of eerie calm that precedes a storm, though the skies were clear. As Elias sat in his small boat, lost in the familiar rhythm of casting his nets, he heard something he hadn't heard in years. It was a voice, faint but unmistakable, Jonah's voice, calling to him from the depths. Elias froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The voice called again, closer this time, clearer. Elias peered over the side of the boat into the dark water, and there, just beneath the surface, he saw his son. Jonah's face was pale, his eyes wide and pleading. His lips moved, but the words were swallowed by the sea. Elias reached out, his hand trembling, but before he could touch his son, Jonah was pulled deeper into the water, his eyes locked on his father's, filled with a sorrow that mirrored Elias's own. Without thinking, Elias dove into the sea, the cold water shocking his senses. He swam down, deeper and deeper, following the fleeting image of his son. The water grew darker, colder, and the pressure in his chest built until it felt like his lungs would burst. But he couldn't stop, he wouldn't stop, until he reached Jonah. Just when it seemed like he could go no further, Elias saw him again, hovering just out of reach, his hand outstretched. Elias pushed himself harder, his fingers brushing against Jonah's, and for a brief moment, their hands clasped. But the moment was fleeting. Jonah's hand slipped from his father's grasp as the sea pulled him down once more, dragging Elias with him. As the last of the air left his lungs, Elias felt a deep, aching sorrow settle over him. He had failed. Again. He had failed to save his son, and now, in his desperate attempt to find him, he had doomed himself as well. The darkness closed in, and Elias felt himself sinking into oblivion. But then, just as all seemed lost, Elias felt a strong hand gripping his arm, pulling him upward. He struggled to see through the murky water, but all he could make out was the faint outline of a figure, dragging him toward the surface. The pressure in his chest eased as they broke through the water, and Elias gasped for air, coughing and choking as he was hauled back into his boat. He lay there, gasping, the stars spinning above him as he tried to make sense of what had happened. When he finally managed to sit up, he was alone. The sea was calm again, the water still as glass. But as he looked out over the dark expanse, he knew with a certainty that went deeper than words, that Jonah was gone, truly gone, and that the figure that had saved him had not been his son, but something else, something that had taken pity on a broken man and given him a second chance. Elias never spoke of that night to anyone, but from then on, the townspeople noticed a change in him. He still went out to sea every day, but the desperate, haunted look in his eyes had faded. He no longer searched the waves for his son, but instead, he began to talk to the other fishermen again, sharing stories, and laughing softly at their jokes. Years passed, and Elias grew old, his body bent and weathered like the wooden beams of his boat. But he never forgot that night, and he never stopped wondering what had pulled him from the depths. Perhaps it was Jonah's spirit, granting him the peace he had so longed for. Or perhaps it was the sea itself, showing mercy to a man who had suffered enough. But whatever it was, Elias knew one thing for certain. The sea had taken his son, but it had also given him back his life, and in the end, that was enough.